What if I told you that one of the greatest military commanders of the ancient world, the man whose name struck fear into nations, was brought to his knees by a disease he could not conquer? And what if the key to his deliverance, the turning point in his story, did not come from another mighty warrior, or a royal decree, or the wealth of a king, but from the quiet whisper of a nameless child, a little Jewish girl, torn from her home, a prisoner in a foreign land, stripped of family, freedom, and future, forgotten by history, yet remembered by heaven. Her voice was small, her life seemed insignificant, and yet her courage, her faith, would open the floodgates of a miracle that would shake the heart of a mighty man and reveal the power of the living God to an unbelieving nation. But how did this happen? How did a child with no army, no influence, and no name become the instrument of a miracle that changed everything? To understand her story, we must first step back into a time of fear, war, and political tension, a time when nations clashed and lives were torn apart. This is the world she lived in, a world where hope was scarce, a world where faith was tested, and yet, in the shadows of despair, a light was about to shine. The year is approximately 850 BC. The ancient Near East trembles under endless warfare. In the north lies Israel, a divided kingdom torn between the God of their fathers and pagan neighbors. To the northeast stands Syria, a military superpower hungry for conquest. Syrian raids come without warning. They sweep through Israeli villages like wolves, carrying away everything of value, including children. Boys and girls are ripped from their families and thrust into lives of slavery in foreign lands, surrounded by foreign gods. But sometimes, in God's sovereignty, what appears to be tragedy becomes the stage for miracle. In Damascus stands General Naaman, commander of Syria's army, personal champion of the king, architect of countless victories. When he enters a room, conversations pause. When he speaks, kings listen. His mansion rivals the palace itself. He has achieved everything the ancient world considers great. Yet beneath his gleaming armor, a shadow grows. It started small, a pale spot on his skin that wouldn't darken, then another. Within months, what began as minor concern became devastating reality: leprosy. In the ancient world, this word carried the weight of a death sentence. Lepers were the living dead cut off from family, society, hope. The great general who had conquered cities could not conquer the rebellion in his own flesh. Syrian physicians shook their heads in defeat. Temple priests offered empty platitudes. The gods of Damascus remained silent. What do you do when you've exhausted every option your world offers? In Naaman's household, a small figure moves quietly through daily tasks. Perhaps 12 years old, her name lost to history but remembered by heaven. Months earlier, she was running through Israelite streets, helping her mother, listening to stories of the mighty God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then came the Syrian raiders, swift, devastating, merciless. Her family was scattered or killed. Her childhood was over, replaced by captivity's brutal reality. Chained with other prisoners, she marched across the desert toward a foreign land. But something remarkable happened in her suffering's darkness. Instead of faith withering under tragedy's weight, it burned brighter. Perhaps it was memory of her mother's prayers, or echo of psalm verses learned at her father's knee, or simply supernatural sustaining power of divine grace in a young heart, refusing to abandon hope. Assigned to serve Naaman's wife, she watched the great general's slow transformation from confidence to despair. She saw conversations stop when he entered rooms. She witnessed futile visits from physicians and magicians, each promising cures that never came. And burning in her young heart was truth no one else in that household possessed. She knew someone who could help. The internal battle in this child's mind must have been intense. She was the lowest in household hierarchy, a foreign slave whose opinions weren't valued. One wrong word could mean punishment or death. The safe choice was silence. But genuine faith cannot remain silent when it knows healing is possible. On an ordinary day, during routine duties, she found courage to approach her mistress. "If only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." 11 simple words, a child's suggestion with trembling voice but unwavering faith. Can you imagine the moment? The Syrian woman looking down at this Hebrew slave, wondering if she'd heard correctly. A cure for leprosy from some prophet they'd never heard of. But what did they have to lose? When Naaman heard his wife's report, something stirred within him, not quite hope, but possibility. King Ben-Hadad's letter to Israel's monarch was diplomatic pressure wrapped in royal courtesy. "With this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of his leprosy." The caravan departing Damascus was unlike any other Syria's greatest general traveling with royal wealth, all because a nameless girl whispered about a Hebrew prophet who could cure the incurable. When they arrived in Samaria, King Joram panicked. "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? See how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me." He tore his robes in despair, fearing this was set up for war. But news reached Prophet Elisha, who responded with beautiful confidence. "Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." Naaman arrived at Elisha's house expecting elaborate ceremony worthy of his rank. Instead, a servant appeared with a message so simple it felt insulting. "Go, wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored." No fanfare, no recognition of his status, just a muddy river and a number, 7. The general's reaction was explosive. "Are not the rivers of Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed?" As he turned to leave in fury, his servants approached with wisdom. "My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then, when he tells you, 'Wash and be cleansed'?" Their logic was unassailable. Why trust complicated solutions more than simple ones? Why refuse something so accessible when he'd come prepared for impossible challenges? The journey to Jordan was internal warfare, pride wrestling with desperation, doubt battling hope. The river wasn't impressive, certainly not by Damascus standards, but perhaps that was the point. God delights in using ordinary things for extraordinary purposes. Naaman entered the water and immersed once, still a leper. Twice, no change. 3 times. 4, 5, 6, nothing. By the 7th immersion, everything changed: his health, his future, the little Jewish girl's credibility, Israel's God's reputation. Everything came down to one final moment under muddy waters of an unremarkable river. When he emerged the 7th time, the Bible describes it in words that have thrilled believers for millennia. His flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young child. Completely, instantly, perfectly clean, better than before the disease, fresh and perfect like a child's skin. The transformation went deeper than flesh. Something fundamental shifted in Naaman's heart and worldview. This man who had served foreign gods now stood with revolutionized understanding of where true power resided. The little Jewish girl's whispered faith had accomplished what no Syrian physician could achieve, what no gold could purchase. Naaman's return to Elisha was radically different, pride replaced by wonder, demands transformed to worship. "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel." He offered payment, but Elisha refused. "As surely as the Lord lives, I will not accept a gift." The healing was free not because it was cheap, but because it was priceless. Naaman then made an extraordinary request. "Please let me be given as much earth as a pair of mules can carry, for your servant will never again make burnt offerings to any other god but the Lord." This was conversion. He wanted Israelite soil to worship the true God in Damascus, religious treason in Syrian terms. But the price of transformation, Elisha blessed him. "Go in peace." The little Jewish girl's suggestion accomplished what armies never could, demonstrating Israel's God's supremacy to Syria's most influential leader. Naaman returned transformed, his testimony spreading throughout Damascus. From this ancient miracle, profound truths emerge. God sees and uses the overlooked ones. The catalyst for transformation was a nameless child whose life seemed insignificant, yet heaven honored her courage and used her voice for miracle. Our circumstances cannot separate us from our purpose. This child had every reason for bitterness, yet maintained trust in God's goodness, positioning herself to become his instrument of healing. Simplicity doesn't indicate lack of power. The Jordan seemed inadequate, Elisha's instruction insufficient, but God's power isn't diminished by humble methods he chooses. Pride often prevents receiving what we desperately need. Naaman almost missed his miracle because healing didn't match his expectations or protect his dignity. One voice speaking truth can change everything. The girl had no idea her faith-filled suggestion would have international implications. She simply shared what she knew about her God with someone needing hope. Today, 3,000 years later, we still tell the story of the little Jewish girl who saved an Israelite through faith, expressed at exactly the right moment. Her name was never recorded, but her impact is immeasurable. She reminds us that God specializes in using the unlikely, overlooked, and underestimated. She teaches that courage isn't fear's absence, it's acting on truth despite feeling powerless. She demonstrates that worst circumstances can become contexts for greatest contributions. The next time you feel too insignificant to make a difference, remember the girl whose whispered faith echoed through palaces, bringing healing to the hopeless and glory to God who specializes in impossible things. In God's economy, no voice is too small, no faith too simple, no life too broken to be used mightily. Sometimes kingdom's fate hangs on whispered trust of a child, refusing to give up on the God who never gives up on us. That truth remains as powerful today as when a nameless girl first dared believe healing was possible, and her God was big enough to handle even a Syrian general's impossible need. He still can, he still will, and sometimes he's waiting for someone with a little Jewish girl's faith to whisper his name into darkness and watch him turn on the light.